Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. And you know what day it is. It's draft day. We got some more draft talk. We're going to talk a little bit about some NFL vets that I think could be traded this weekend, tonight. I'm going to start off Jalen Ramsey, obviously big name. They've already agreed to, him and the Dolphins already agreed to mutually explore trade options. Chris Gear flat out came out and said it last week in his press conference. It makes sense. I can see why Miami would do it, get off of that contract. The only thing is Miami does not have a lot of cornerback depth besides Jalen Ramsey. So if Jalen Ramsey does get traded, Miami is definitely going to need to add to that secondary. The Rams are reportedly in talks of reacquiring Jalen Ramsey. It's a move that makes sense. The Rams do need secondary help. The one thing I think is kind of funny there is his beef with Davante Adams. What's going to happen there if they're teammates? I don't know. Historically, Jalen Ramsey and Davante Adams have not gotten along. I'll just leave it at that. But I think that's kind of interesting. If LA does end up reacquiring Jalen Ramsey, what's that locker room kind of going to look like? Could be funny. I think there's a couple other landing spots, though, that do make sense for him. Washington has really been kind of in that vet hunting, adding to try to become a budding contender after their NFC title run last season. Added Laramie Tunsil, added Deebo Samuel, added Marshawn Lattimore last year. Could this be a spot that makes sense? They still have a quarterback on a rookie year deal, and it could be a team that makes sense. They have a lot of cap space there. Atlanta, I think, is also a team that makes a ton of sense. Raheem Morris, new head coach, and was the defensive coordinator with Jalen Ramsey at one point. They know each other well. I think that's a spot that could make sense too. He could play opposite A.J. Terrell. Maybe, but I don't know. Jalen Ramsey, I think, is probably going to end up being an LA Ram again. Trey Hendrickson, also a guy he could be gone very quickly. Requested a trade out of Cincinnati. Wants a new contract. Kind of unhappy with the progress that's made. He's kind of been taking a back seat to the offensive deals that Cincinnati's made, just in terms of re-signing Jamar Chase, re-signing T. Higgins, giving both of them $30+ million a year. Chase, $41. He's the highest paid non-quarterback in the league right now. Trey Hendrickson wants a new deal. Rightfully so. The dude has had 35 total sacks over the past 2 seasons, 17.5 in both of the past 2 years, and that's a guy that should deserve a new contract, right? But I don't think Cincinnati's going to be able to pay him. If he's still unhappy, I think they could try to look to trade him, especially if they take a D end at 17. Do they try to flip Hendrickson for a second-round pick, maybe another late middle-round pick? And could teams like Seattle, who they kind of need help on the edge right now, Arizona. I think Arizona is a team that really fits a lot. Just from a fit standpoint, they need help on the edge. He could fill a really big hole there for the Cardinals. It's a young team that's kind of building up. You can have a veteran presence there in Trey Hendrickson. I think that's a spot that kind of makes sense for him. I don't know. It really sounds like Cincinnati wants to hang on to him. I don't think that's going to be feasible for them financially, at least in the future. Whether they realize that now or in a year or two, that remains to be seen. But definitely another name to kind of watch for, keep an eye out on. Kayvon Thibodeaux, I also think, is another name that could be on the move on the defensive side of the ball. The Giants have to deal with his 5th-year option this upcoming year, possibly give him a new deal. They already brought in Brian Burns from Carolina, gave him an extension. And then if Cleveland goes Travis Hunter at 2, and then if the Giants go Abdul Carter at 3, do they then look to try to move on from Kayvon Thibodeaux, get a pick from him, draft somebody else? Then you have Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Kayvon Thibodeaux. He could be kind of seen as luxury that could be got rid of. I think they could deem him expendable if they do take Carter at 3. That's going to be a name to kind of watch. Or they keep all 3, try to really build out that pass rush unit. I think that's also a possibility for the Giants for sure. George Pickens, this is a guy that's been in the news the past few days. Obviously, the Steelers kind of remade their room this past season, traded for DK Metcalf, gave him a new deal worth up to $130 million over 4 years. There is an out after 2027, after 2 years, $60 million. There is a potential out for that contract. They'd only have, it'd be like a dead cap of around 18 mil, maybe something like that. So nothing too expensive. But in name, in theory, it's a 4-year deal. With DK Metcalf on board, is George Pickens expendable in Pittsburgh? Could they look to move on from him? He's obviously going to need a new contract as well. Could Pittsburgh try to get a day 2 pick for George Pickens? And then George Pickens also unfollowed the Steelers on Instagram this week, yesterday, I believe, but unfollowed the official Pittsburgh Steelers Instagram account, kind of sparking the rumors, stoking the flames that maybe he could be on the move. If not, though, I think that's a hysterical wide receiver room with George Pickens and DK Metcalf. Those are 2 guys that will go to battle. I'll say that. Just 2 funny personalities there. Another guy I think is potentially that hasn't really been talked about recently as a trade candidate, but I think Jaire Alexander could be a guy that could be on the move. Only has appeared in 16 games over the past 2 seasons. Availability and injury history has been a big issue with Jaire Alexander. When he's on the field, he's great. He's an all-pro type candidate for the Packers at cornerback, but the issue is he's not on the field a whole lot, and he also has a $25 million cap hit for this upcoming season. Could the Packers try to move on from that cap hit and try to recoup something from Jaire Alexander? The only issue here, again, kind of similar to Jalen Ramsey, is the Packers do not have a ton of cornerback depth. So if they move on from Jaire Alexander, they're going to have to add to that position at some point over the weekend. If not in the first round, at least some point during the weekend, they're going to have to add depth. Miami, I think, might draft a cornerback at 13. That's very possible. I don't know if the Packers do. We'll see. But then another guy I think is kind of a sneaky pick could be Dallas Goedert. Obviously, Philadelphia Eagle, really successful tight end, probably top 10 tight end in the league, but he's in the last year of his contract. He's going to need a new deal. Could Philly look to move on from Dallas Goedert and in advance of giving him a contract extension? This is something that they do repeatedly, especially on the trenches in the line. They reload draft year after year to kind of replace these guys that are leaving. I could see it. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more it seems like an Eagles move to make. They would have to replace the tight end, but I think they could get a decent value for Dallas Goedert. I'm really looking at a team like, could Indianapolis look to acquire Dallas Goedert if they kind of lose out on one of the tight ends that they were looking at in the first round? Could that be a replacement for their room for a draft pick? I think it would make sense. Shane Steichen obviously coached Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia, really familiar with him, would be a good fit for that scheme, would be a massive upgrade for that room in general. I think that's a guy that he could definitely be on the move, as well as Anthony said, Mark Andrews. I think could be on the move as well. At least names that are going to be in conversations. GMs are going to talk about some of these guys, maybe not tonight, but at least throughout the weekend for sure. And we'll see if anybody does end up getting traded. We're probably going to see one or two. Could we see a Kirk Cousins trade? I kind of doubt that. But you never know. That's always the fun of draft day, of the draft weekend, of the spectacle that is the NFL draft. You gotta love it, right? We're going to take another short break on the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about college guys now. I promise. We're going to talk about college guys, but we're going to talk about college guys that I think could be 2026 first rounders. So we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.